And we'll get into it here, but I wonder if should give some sort of disclosure. It's kind of like a nerdy philosophical topic
Yeah,
when you
yeah,
get into um, objective morality, relativism, subjectivism, nihilism, these things. I was wondering, maybe just as a question, I'm curious your thoughts. It's like we tend to skip over this idea. Like there's a book I like, the Big Book of Virtues or something like that.
yeah.
It's
William
something
Dennett.
like that. Huh?
William Dennett, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, it's like 500 pages or so, or something like that. It's not a small book,
Hmm.
but it kind of jumps over this idea. It's coming from the perspective that you've already adopted, that there's true good and beautiful moral objectivism is a thing. And I kind of get why. It's a little bit of a tricky tricky topic to get into. But yeah, what comes to mind initially to kick us off?
Well, I think it's important because I think it's especially important now because it's not taken for granted anymore. That idea of that there is a an actual objective morality is no longer taken for granted. It's not an assumption that there is a right and wrong or a better or worse. That there are these true virtues, um, and without that assumption in society, that kind of leads to a lack of connection, leads to a lot of anxiety, a lot of feeling lost, a lot of the rabbit hole of rationalizing each decision that you want to do, like we kind of talked about last time. So I think it's really important to put our thumb on this question, hopefully do it in a way that's really accessible, but because when you just skip over it, and take it for granted that yes, there is virtue, right, wrong, and everything, then you kind of lose half the audience already because they're like,
Yeah,
I don't take this for granted, right? That so I think it does um, bear giving a good argument for why you should care about
yeah,
virtues, why there actually might be a right and wrong.
yeah. And sometimes I think, like with a lot of topics, maybe we're on a spectrum in terms of how much we're, you know, really behind it. And
Hmm.
there are some aspects where like I can fall into maybe a bit of moral skepticism, or it honestly, I don't know if we'll be able to unpack it. Hopefully we can, but it gets muddy for me. Like let me an example. I was trying to think of how do I explain this, but you know how there's the idea that it's like it's neither good nor bad. Say in stoicism, this idea, it's like something happens to you, it's it's okay. It's not things that upset us, but it's how we think about them.
Sure.
Like there is this like truth to that type of thing shows up, the term neither good nor bad. um so
That's
that
judgment. That's placing
y-
judgment on like kind
yeah,
of fortune is a good way of I think you can kind of compartmentalize these things.
yeah.
Um, for example, like if I there's an old Zen saying that's fairly similar. It's like the kids. Um, that this guy's son, falls off a horse and breaks his leg, and they're like, "Oh, that's bad," and the guy says maybe, and then the next day, like there's this guy who comes in and is trying to enlist people for this war, and his son doesn't have to go because he has a broken leg. And someone says, "Oh, what good fortune," and he says, "Maybe." And it's back and forth, and so yeah, when we're talking about fortune, there's this yeah, it's good, bad, that those judgments are probably not so useful. Um, I think you can draw a line though, and say, like, when we're talking about ethics, or morality, things that your impact uh, uh, on the world around you, um, then you can say that there's a better and worse. It, it, per, at least when you get more extreme, you can see it. It's really obvious. Like, should I, um, when I'm, should I steal this person's car, kill them, steal this person's car just because I want it, or deal with the fact that I don't have the money for this car, and I don't have this car, and not
Yeah.
kill this person for their car. It's like, which is better? It's
Yeah.
obvious, right? So I think that you can draw a line and say, like, okay, fortune is different. Speaking about events and fortune, whether it's good or bad, with the things that are happening to us in our life. Um,
Y-
it probably doesn't do a lot of good to judge good versus bad. But when you're talking about ethical decisions, behaviors, you could call them good or bad. You might just say whether they contribute. If you want to get away from ethics, you might even just say whether they contribute to your to human fulfillment or not. Um, Whether they are positive towards for utilities to society, however you want to look at it, if you were a utilitarian. But whether they contribute to human flourishing, or make human flourishing less likely. um,
Yeah.
but I think you can make that distinction.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And hopefully we can set up a couple throughout the conversation, a couple parameters and lines and distinctions and things like that. Um, but even in the way like on this particular point, I love the parable. Maybe yes, maybe no. Um,
Yeah.
but even in the term of ethics, if you do some sort of ethical transgression against me, for me, neither good nor bad. It's like, and they're coming from the perspective of it's neither good nor bad because it didn't harm your character. But on your end, like the person committing some sort of ethical wrongdoing, it's not exactly the case. So it's like it's this
Yes.
weird, yeah, that gets like tricky to me in the way of like you talked about the word judgment, great word, and the Stoics are talking about that in judgment, but there's some sort of like flexibility in thinking, like cognitive flexibility that is required around this. And I've
Absolutely.
seen a lot of debates, and I've seen there are many people that make the case for some sort of moral skepticism. Like interestingly, we were chatting before we hit record. I sent you a video by a guy named Kaplan, this philosophy professor, and I found it interesting. He said something, if I heard him correctly, that the majority of his students, like these people that are taking a philosophy 101 course, he would categorize them as moral skeptics, or in this idea of subjectivism, that it
Mm.
depends. And it's I found that interesting because it's, maybe I'm bringing in too many things here, but even in the thing of like from a Christian perspective, even in the way of some sort of ethical wrongdoing, there's the judgment from another perspective of me not judging you. Me, instead of like judgment towards you as an individual, like forgiveness and compassion. Me, the common well-known scripture thing of pointing out the speck in someone else's eye, while there's a log in mine. So it
Yeah.
gets like these type of things, it gets a bit tricky.
And you're right. Cognitive flexibility is a great word. I actually wrote a Substack post on that very well. I use a large chunk of it was going into that very verse. because
Nice.
and I kind of point out that just after this is comes from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, and shortly after that, Jesus makes the comment, but you so don't judge. Take the log out of your eye before pointing out the speck in your whatever. And then, so I shouldn't whatever, but I can't
Yeah.
quote as well as many others could. And But shortly after that, he says, um, "Don't throw your pearls to pigs," which is saying um, that you need to be able to judge who is a pig. I mean, inherent in that statement is, so he says, literally a line later, he says, don't focus on the speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a log in yours. And then a line later, don't throw your pearls to pigs, which requires you to have the ability to judge who is a pig, who is not going to, basically be able to, um, you know, it's kind of like the you're the average of the five people you hang out with the most is kind of what Jesus is alluding to there. So you have to be able to judge who's going to support you in this path or not. So you're right.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cognitive flexibility required here.
Yeah.
The ability to note that at the same time I might not want to judge others, but I need to be able to see in others what behaviors aren't fruitful that I don't want to continue and fall in myself. And I need to be able to see in others, like, you're on this path that is very destructive to society. All right. And I don't want to support you in that path. And like, even if I care about you, I might have to, caring about you might be part of caring about you might be helping lead you away from that path. Like, if I care about you, I don't let you steal, because I care about you and I think you're better than that.